Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to another episode of the Jayden Bryce Show, the show where we talk about the hottest topics in the world of sports. I'm your host, Jay, and I'm glad to be here with you again, guys. I know you guys are probably surprised that I am live on a Tuesday night, but I wanted to change some things up. I'm really tired of reacting to games a couple of days after they have already happened. I've had a lot of just memorization issues when it comes to these games. I know it was probably evident yesterday when I was talking about the Seahawks game, like 4 days after it happened. So I wanted to go ahead and talk about these games fresh off of my mind. So I want to get to all the Monday night action we had last night, and it was absolutely abysmal. The NFL did a horrific job scheduling these games. I don't know why they did us like this. Both games were absolutely awful. So many penalties. Bad football. Y'all know me. I don't like bad football. But yesterday, we had bad football on display. So we're going to discuss the Monday night football action. Tyreek Hill having a season-ending injury, a horrific, probably career-altering injury, as we say. Then we're going to get to the stuff about A.J. Brown. I highlighted it and foreshadowed it yesterday's show, talking about the Philadelphia Eagles. But we're going to expound upon that today. And lastly, I know I didn't make it the headliner of my show. I probably should have, but we are going to be discussing Jerry Jones and Micah Parsons and something that Jerry Jones had to say about Micah Parsons recently in his post-game interview on Sunday night. But before we get into all that, as always, subscribe to the channel, like the podcast, check out my podcast below in the description if you would love and like to check it out on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. But without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, let's go ahead and get into these games. Monday Night Football was absolutely abysmal in all facets. It was not good. The NFL put out a bad product, and they should really highly consider going forward flexing a lot of these games. I know y'all probably did see where they just flexed the Bucks and another game in, and I can't remember who the teams were, but they flexed a 4 o'clock game that was supposed to be played at 1 o'clock into the 4 o'clock window. So they're doing a good job about it, but they have to get better. But let's just talk about the Jets and the Dolphins. Obviously, y'all guys are probably very much aware Tyreek Hill suffered a season-ending injury. It was absolutely awful. At this point, I was trying to watch both games at the same time, and I had the Dolphins game on my phone, and I was watching the Broncos on the big screen. I saw it live when it happened. I was hoping that wasn't Tyreek Hill. Obviously, I don't wish injury on anybody, but I remember vividly seeing a number. I saw it was number 10, and the guy was headed to the sideline, caught the ball, and then something just looked off. I was sitting there looking at it, it's like, what is going on with his leg? His leg was literally twisted in half. The injury was absolutely gruesome. I watched it live. I did not want to watch it again. Thoughts and prayers of Tyreek Hill. He seemed like he had to be in high spirits when he was leaving. I know his body was in shock, but it's going to be a tough road to recovery. Playing the wide receiver position and just the demand. Tyreek Hill is not your 6'4" guy. He's never had the best hands. He's never had the best route running. His game has always been about his speed. With this type of injury, I don't know how that is going to affect his speed. You know, he is an Olympic level type runner. His game has been predicated on his speed. I don't know how it's going to affect his speed, but all prayers to Tyreek Hill. He is, I hope he could come back 100%. It's going to be a tough road for recovery. I don't see a scenario where he's able to come back next year. Nick Chubb is the first person that comes to mind when I saw an injury like this. He was able to actually come back and have a successful NFL career. So maybe Tyreek Hill, he's always been a muscular guy. He's always been in very good shape. He's always took care of his body. So maybe his body is going to adapt well to this injury. He's never had a season-ending injury. This is going to be his first one. So hopefully his body is going to be able to adapt. Now let's just get to the game overall. The New York Jets are absolutely awful. For them to be coached by Aaron Glenn, a guy who was the defensive coordinator for Danny Campbell's and the Detroit Lions, he was part of the whole culture change there in Detroit. And when they hired Aaron Glenn, he decided not to, said bye-bye to Aaron Rodgers. We don't want your services. And everybody was having high hopes on the Jets because it was the type of resume that Aaron Glenn had built up. You know, he's this guy, he's built on grit, he's all about culture. But this team is super undisciplined. The amount of penalties that the Jets had yesterday was literally, it made no sense. I've never understood a team that was super, totally undisciplined. The Jets had 13 penalties for 100 yards. Defensively, Aaron Glenn's a defensive-minded head coach. They couldn't stop a cold. Like, the run, the fumble that occurred in the end zone by Braylon Allen, super uncalled for. The one that Justin Fields had in the middle of the field on 4th down, that was just absolutely bad. Justin Fields, I don't know what he was doing. They're really able to run the ball well as a team. The Jets, they ran the ball for what? 7 yards a carry. They were able to rush all on the Dolphins. But for some reason, they just kept wanting to drop back and pass with Justin Fields. But the offense is pathetic. All the abysmal penalties that they had. The only highlight of their whole game was the phenomenal run that Justin Fields had, which that run was absolutely nuts. I had to rewatch it twice, and I was like, dude, if Justin Fields was able to literally take his prolific run style that he has on offense and, you know, transfer that to his throwing, because we saw what Justin Fields looked like in the preseason throwing the football, and in the first week against the Pittsburgh Steelers, he looked like Joe Montana out there throwing dimes, and I didn't want to get 100% bamboozled by the way Justin Fields was playing, but we got bamboozled. Justin Fields could not hit nobody in the chest last night. He threw a couple nice balls to Garrett Wilson to the sideline, to one tiki-tack offensive pass interference that they called. That was a pretty nice throw. And, you know, the one that he threw to Garrett Wilson at the end of the game. But there was a couple medium throws 5 yards down the field that he threw to Breece Hall, where Breece Hall literally had to turn his body just to catch the ball. He threw a lot of inaccurate passes yesterday. Justin Fields has to consistently get better at throwing the football if he just wants to continue to be successful. Now, when you look at his stats, he was 20 for 27. You could say he was fairly accurate, but you got to watch the game. From the eye test, he doesn't throw a nice ball. It's not a clean spiral. And he makes the receivers work harder than what they need to catch the football. But just defensively, they're bad. Too many penalties. Sauce Gardner, I don't know what's better start than what he did last year. That was my takeaway with the Jets. I'm super disappointed in the way they've looked penalty-wise with under Aaron Glenn. Last night was super uncalled for. Granted, there was a couple penalties that should have win against the Dolphins, with definitely the late hit against number 89 there towards the end of the game. That should have been a penalty. It wasn't called, but still. Overall, just super undisciplined football team. They're bad. 0-4. You know, they arguably should have won 2 games already, but it's the Jets. Nothing is going to change. If Aaron Glenn couldn't do it, they're still undisciplined. They're still not fully attention to detail, and they're losing football games. For some reason, the defense has not been able to hone in to the efficiency that they did 2 or 3 years ago. Last season, they weren't good, and then this year, they're not that good as well. Tua Tagovailoa was able to do whatever he wanted to do, and that's the reason why we're going to go ahead and transition to Tua Tagovailoa. Tua Tagovailoa was very comfortable yesterday. He wasn't really pressured in the pocket. He could just pretty much drop back and throw. Darren Waller pretty much had a coming out party, and he was able to notch in 2 touchdowns in his first game. Devin Achane, he was able to run the ball very efficiently. And I know we all saw the play with Tua sliding there in the second half. I held my breath there for a minute. Tua, we can't have it. You got to play smarter. The team has invested their whole future in you. And we know we've had questions about Tua. You know, he's actually notched in 2 decent games. First couple of games of the season, he looked absolutely abysmal. Last week, he played pretty decent against the Buffalo Bills. And then yesterday, obviously, it's against the Jets. They're not that good. They're pretty pathetic. He notched in a pretty good game. Tyreek Hill, he was actually having a phenomenal night until he absolutely shattered his leg. Jalen Waddle got some catches. Darren Waller, it was a pretty good offensive showing. They're not going to be a playoff team. They're not good. Mike Daniels, he's on the hot seat. It's not even an argument that he's on the hot seat. I imagine if the Miami Dolphins has not won a playoff game in years, and that they've had some pretty good teams. Defensively, I thought they played pretty well too. Defensively, they were flying around on the football. The back end played better than what I thought they were going to. But they're still not good. And overall, this game was just super boring to watch. It was like watching paint dry. I just don't think the Dolphins are very flashy, specifically on offense. They're pretty, now without Tyreek Hill, what are they going to do? Is Jalen Waddle going to be able to fill in that number one role? We know he has the capability to, although he's been playing Robin to Tyreek Hill for the past 3 years. Is Darren Waller now, after he's not played football in a full 2 years, he's all of a sudden going to have to become a big target for Tua Tagovailoa? Can they get Ollie Gordon running and going into the run game? Can they get a more complimentary run game to keep, because Davon Achane is pretty injury prone. There's just a lot of just running components when it comes to the Dolphins. But overall, I can't even really say vividly if I enjoyed watching this game, preferably more than the other. It was just not a good game to watch. Two bad teams, two teams in the AFC East who are not going to be in the playoffs, and two teams who have a lot to work on from a front office standpoint if they have any hopes in the future of being in the conversation of trying to win the Super Bowl. Obviously, the Dolphins have been in the consideration maybe like two years ago. But in the end, I don't trust Tua in the big game against a good team. He's always done these type of numbers and played this well against a bad team like the Jets. But whenever he's played the superior opponent, he crumbles. And yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say about that game there. Now, let's go ahead and move on to the other game, which I found this game to be just as boring too, because for some reason, Jake Browning, after 2 years ago, he was able to come in for Joe Burrow and play relatively well. It's like Jake Browning just forgot how to play football. Like he's been out after throwing 3 interceptions last week against the Minnesota Vikings. He goes into this game and just doubles down on that performance. So you're telling me, Jake Browning, you have 2 absolutely prolific wide receivers. You have 2 number ones. These are 2 guys that Joe Burrow vouched for to get their contract. T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. The Bengals paid them, so you're pretty set. And then you got Chase Brown, a pretty good back at the running back position. And you're telling me Jamar Chase caught 3 balls. He was only targeted 8 times. Oh, no, sorry. He was actually targeted a lot. I was over here, Chase Brown. I thought that was Jamar Chase, but that was Chase Brown. Jamar Chase had 8 targets and 5 catches for 23 yards. 5 catches for 23 yards? Really? And I was, even early on in the game, Jake Brown actually threw a couple nice balls. He threw a couple of nice go balls to T. Higgins that got called back because of penalties. It's like literally the Jets and the Bengals last night were just playing and figure out who could get the more flags between one another because it was just bad. Each time in the first half, Jake Brown and the Bengals, he would make a nice throw and it would get called back by a penalty, either holding, illegal procedure, something. It absolutely deflated the offense. And I know you see the statistic on the bottom of my lower third. The Bengals had 159 total yards. And I want to tell you, maybe 60 yards of that was in the first drive. So in a span of 3.5 quarters, realistically, the Bengals only were able to produce 80 to 90 yards of offense. That is absolutely pathetic. When you have T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, 2 number 1 wide receivers, and they are getting absolutely paid like it. And it's more of the same with the Bengals. They just can't protect the quarterback. A lot of the time, Jake Browning, whenever he got to his first and second read, he'd panic. Rusher got in his face. Give credit to the Denver Broncos. That defensive line was humming all night on that offensive line of the Cincinnati Bengals, and they forced Jake Browning to start panning out to his right, strolling to his right, throwing the ball out of bounds, forcing a 3-and-out. And to get to the team stats, what were third down efficiency? The Bengals were 2-11 on third down. They didn't even go for it on fourth down. It's just they were absolutely just pathetic. Now, let's move on to the Broncos side of things. Now, the Broncos, Bo Nix and the guys, they were very bad to start the first quarter. Bo Nix threw a lot. He wasn't really efficient throwing the football. But to give credit where credit is due, Bo Nix absolutely honed in the next three quarters, as we just saw, and it's in the lower third. They were able to produce 519 yards worth of offense. If you can get that, you're going to be able to compete against anybody offensively. J.K. Dobbins was able to rush 400 yards. The telecast pretty much said this is the first time Sean Payton has had a rusher to rush over 100 yards in like 30-some games. So that was a huge milestone. R.J. Harvey, a guy who they've been trying to get going, and it's a guy who they're trying to have the 1-2 combo since J.K. Dobbins. He's pretty much had like 3 career-ending surgeries in his career, so he's definitely not going to be your bell cow back. He was actually able to, they're trying to turn him more into this pass-catching type of guy, and he was able to catch some passes. He actually would have had a touchdown if Bo Nix wouldn't have thrown it over his head. Sadly, R.J. Harvey's 5'8", and he's short as crap. But, Bo Nix overshot him. He could have had a touchdown, but, he actually was able to get him a touchdown receiving the ball as well. Cortland Sutton done his thing. He got a touchdown early on in the game. Marvin Mims as well. He got him a touchdown. They were able to run the ball super efficiently. The Broncos, for some reason, so far this season, Bo Nix is able to, and offensively, they're able to move the ball, but every time Bo Nix just does a head-scratching throw to kill the drive. If we can go back to the interception drive where he threw the interception in the end zone, Bo Nix, they move the ball at will, but Bo Nix just makes the one throw, and that he throws it, he'll throw a pick or make a fumble or just throw it the wrong. Just Bo Nix just does things that just makes you want to scratch your head and be like, what are you doing? And inevitably, I think that is going to kill this Broncos team if they're wanting to win a playoff game. I know this is something that Sean Payton can fix because Sean Payton is the quarterback whisperer. Okay, he was able to take Drew Brees to a Super Bowl. He helped Drew Brees get an MVP. Granted, Drew Brees was a stud himself. We cannot go ahead and put Bo Nix in the same stature as Drew Brees. But we know that Sean Payton is able to develop young quarterbacks. So maybe this is something that Sean Payton will be able to fix. Now, we've seen the multitude of clips where there's plenty of times where Bo Nix and Sean Payton has been butt heads, specifically in week 1. It's like Bo Nix and Sean Payton could not get on one accord at all in the first game of the season. But if Bo Nix can put it together, because he has the talent, he has an arm. Did you guys see that throw that he threw to Troy Franklin on the seam route up the middle on cover 2 between both defenders? Hit him right in the hands. It was a little underthrown, but he threw the ball 60 yards. The dude's an absolute talent. It's actually fascinating to see how well he's been able to acclimate to the league when a lot of people, when he played at Auburn, he wasn't that good. He was able to transfer to Oregon and pretty much save his draft stock, because if he would have stayed in Auburn, instead of being a first-round pick, he would have arguably been a third or fourth-round pick. But it's been amazing. He was a good quarterback. Bo Nix, he was in the Elite 11. I think it was in the Elite 11 with Justin Fields, if I'm not mistaken. But it's been absolutely great to see him be able to turn around and turn into a top 12, 13 caliber quarterback. And he's a quarterback that if he continues to mature his game and work on his game, he can inevitably be able to take the Broncos to a deep playoff run because they have the defense. Now, this Broncos defense is absolutely phenomenal. That Benito guy off the edge, I didn't even know he was the edge. I just thought he was an off-ball linebacker. He's actually on the ball. He got a couple of sacks yesterday, and it may be granted, I'm not, this is the first time I've been able to vividly watch the Broncos on defense. I just know they've all, Pat Surtain, defensive player of the year over there on the defensive side of the ball. He's phenomenal. He had Jamar Chase in a bag pretty much. They got good linebackers. They got Drake Greenlaw on the way, coming off of a quad injury. And they were just able to get to the passer. And if you're able to get to the passer, stop the run, they're great on the back end. You can play great defense and compete against anybody. Now, they got a gauntlet in that same division, but I think the Broncos have the recipe, and they can be able to compete. Because you're in a division with the Chargers and the Chiefs. That division is going to be absolutely fascinating to watch. I think this week they play the Eagles. That's going to be a great game to watch. I don't know if they're playing at Philly or at Denver. Let's see here. They're playing at Philly. Philadelphia's like 18-0, I think right now, 20-0, going into last season. So maybe, hopefully, Bo Nix and the guys can give the Eagles their first loss. But that's pretty much all I want to hit on when it pertains to that game. And we're going to go ahead and move on to our next topic. Let's get into some more serious things. Let's talk about A.J. Brown. I hinted around it yesterday when we were talking about the Buccaneers game, and I was, talking about Jalen Hurts and the Eagles, how they're able to squeak by with these victories when they have not played great football by any stretch of the imagination. We know that A.J. Brown so far this season has not been off to a great start. We can see it here. He has only 14 receptions and 151 yards on the season. That ranks 66th and 61st, respectfully. That's not good. You're under a new offensive coordinator in Kevin Patullo. Kellen Moore, the boy wonder, he's not there no more. He got a head coaching job for the New Orleans Saints. And even under Shane Steichen, A.J. Brown was able to be super efficient. But for some reason, A.J. Brown and the Eagles coaching staff and Jalen Hurts has not been on one accord to start the year. The first couple of weeks I don't even know this. A.J. Brown had like 2 or 3 targets in the first game against the Cowboys. And then the second week, it was more of the same. And even going into the third game with the Rams back in week 3, the first half, it was more of the same. And then in the second half, they just say, screw it. I don't know why they did at halftime. Kevin Patullo and Jalen Hurts, they got together. They said, hey, let's finally throw A.J. Brown the ball. And you saw what happened. He breakout game, he got 100 yards. So a lot of the Eagles fans and, mostly anybody in the media space were sitting there thinking, okay, the Eagles are back. I even said, I was like, okay, the Philadelphia Eagles are back. They seem to found their groove on the offensive side of the ball. After, accumulating the negative yardage they did in the first half with the Rams, and they did the same thing on Sunday against the Buccaneers. But we were all sitting there thinking, hey, maybe they found it and got it together. They didn't. I want to say how many. A.J. Brown had 9 targets, and he had 2 balls. He caught 2 balls. Now, what we can say is, well, at least they're targeting him because they were forcing him the ball on Sunday. They really were. But let's actually get to the quote at hand. So, after the game, A.J. Brown posted a cryptic tweet on Twitter that was later deleted. He said this: if you're not welcomed, not listened to, quietly withdrawn, don't make a scene. Shrug your shoulders and be on your way. Now, what is something that we learned about A.J. Brown when they won the Super Bowl last year? I have his post, and we're going to read it together. But essentially, A.J. Brown laid it out and said that he does not care to win a Super Bowl. To paraphrase what he said, the Super Bowl did not fulfill him. And we're going to discuss exactly what he said. This was a screenshot of his post when he won the Super Bowl. He said, and I quote, "After a few days, I've had the time to reflect on being a champion. I tried to feel how everyone made it seem to be a champion, and unfortunately, it was short-lived. 2 days to be exact. I've never been a champion at the highest level before, but I thought my hard work would be justified by winning it all. It wasn't. My thrill for this game comes when I dominate. It's the hunt that does it for me. It's when the DB drops his head and surrender because he can't F with me. Sorry for the language. The intense battles, early mornings, late nights, sacrifices. I love putting smiles on people's faces. Don't get me wrong, but it just wasn't what I thought it would be. It's the journey that I love the most. Back to work." So he's he says this. He's kind of, what's the word I'm looking for here? He's kind of like, he's talking in one ear and out of the other. It's like he's trying to not make it sound as bad as he's trying to make it sound. Like he's trying to say that he's still, I can allude to what he's trying to say. He's trying to sound like, he's trying to not sound so harsh and make it seem like he still wants to win, but he just, at the end of the day, doesn't enjoy winning, like he said. A.J. Brown is one of these receivers. He feels satisfied when he has he catches 7, 8, 9 balls for $150, $120, and wins. Heck, he could even lose and he wouldn't care. He'd rather lose the game, catch 7, 8, 9 balls for $150 and lose, than catch 2 balls like he did on Sunday for 20 yards and win a Super Bowl. That's the type of guy that A.J. Brown is. Now, Nick Sirianni, he came out and in a presser yesterday, and he was pretty much like, yeah, there's nothing going on. It's the same old that everybody says. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with A.J. Brown. He's probably frustrated because he's not able to contribute to winning. But, I have all faith and I believe that A.J. Brown is going to be with us. Now, to answer my headline of the show, do I think A.J. Brown is going to get traded? I don't. If they were losing, right? I feel like, honestly, if the Eagles right now were 1-3, which they are, from the way they've played, like it is 1-3 could have been a possibility if this was any other team but the Philadelphia Eagles, because the Philadelphia Eagles, for some reason, just continue to find a way to win ball games. But realistically, and let's hypothetically say, if they were 1-3 and A.J. Brown was playing the way he was playing right now in this offense under Kevin Patullo, I could almost guarantee you that he would have requested a trade. In my whole heart, I do. Because he's accomplished the job. He's won a Super Bowl. He's got his money. What else is going to fulfill him? I don't know. He loves the grind. Maybe he likes the grind of, like he said, he loves to wake up in the morning. He likes to work. Maybe he would more farther enjoy trying to go to another team and win a Super Bowl with somebody else. Now that he's completed the task with the Eagles. I don't know. I'm just making assumptions here. But he's not getting traded. The Eagles are 4-0. They're going to end up winning 11, 12, 13 games because it's the Eagles. They find a way to win. I'm calling them the Kansas City Chiefs of last year. They're going to play mediocre football as a ball club, and some way, somehow, they're going to muster up the number 1 seed in the NFC. And I can predict that I don't think they're going to win the Super Bowl this year. I just don't. I don't trust the offensive coordinator. And to give some credit to A.J. Brown, they're too conservative. And that is something that A.J. Brown really conveyed last week when they had the big game, because he's like, A.J. Brown said, man, we're so talented. We're too conservative. If we should play more aggressive, we can win games. Because I've watched these games. And most of the time, A.J. Brown's running bull jive routes. Credit Shannon Sharp. He's either running a fade, he's running a comeback, or he's running a slant route. Majority of the time, it's a comeback or a slant route. Every time I turn around, when Jalen Hurts throws the ball and completes it to A.J. Brown, he's running a slant route or a comeback route. It never fails. Y'all go back and watch the highlights from Sunday's game in the second half when Jalen Hurts was literally forcing the ball to A.J. Brown. What was A.J. Brown running? A stop route. Literally. They cannot get the ball throwing a deep post, a crossing route. A.J. Brown, he never runs any of them routes. I don't understand it for the life of me, but that's just the route tree that they're running. That's probably something that A.J. Brown is really frustrated about, and I don't particularly blame him for it. But to answer the question, he's not getting traded. You're 4-0. You're on a team that's 4-0, you know? And going into next week against the Denver Broncos, you're going to go up against a DB room that is really well coached and that is really good. If the Buccaneers were able to do that to A.J. Brown, I definitely do imagine that the Denver Broncos is going to be able to do that with Pat Surtain. They had T. Higgins and Jamar Chase relatively in a blender yesterday in a baggie. And next week, we're going to get some type of article or something about A.J. Brown being frustrated about his role currently in the Eagles offense. So, yeah, that is pretty much all we could take away from it. A.J. Brown is just this type of guy in this point of his career. He's accomplished the main goal. At the end of the day, what makes him happy is what he said. He likes to demoralize his opponents by catching a bunch of balls on them, getting 80, 90 to 100 yards that game. And he'd rather do that no matter the result of winning or losing. That's what he would rather do than follow the formula right now that the Eagles like. The Eagles formula, led under the culture of Nick Sirianni, they've set this culture. Do whatever it takes to win. Jalen Hurts has established that, and Jalen Hurts is not going to sabotage that by trying to force feed the football to A.J. Brown. It's not going to happen. Do I inevitably see them more than likely going down a divorce down the road? More than likely. But that is another topic for another day. Now, lastly, let's go ahead and end it off with this. I know it's probably been a fast show. I've been trying to work on, getting these topics in and out, just fast, quick, get these shows over. Quick and efficient. Always quick and efficient. Jerry Jones. And this is a portion of the game that I sound off on last night about the Cowboys and the Packers game. I was talking about the Jerry Jones and the Micah Parsons stuff, how I consumed media on Monday, and I was seeing everybody's takes when it refers to Micah Parsons, and everybody was talking about, if Micah Parsons was a part of the game on Sunday, the Dallas Cowboys could have won the game. It was that one defensive stop that the Dallas Cowboys needed. And I was sitting there hollering, bull jive, bull jive, bull jive. If Micah Parsons was there, it would have been the same result, or the Cowboys would have lost. And that was my argument. But Jerry Jones had this to say. He said, and I quote, "It's very simple." And he's referring to paying Dak and not Micah Parsons. He said this, and I quote, "It's very simple. Dak was indispensable in my mind, and Micah Parsons wasn't." Now, after first reading this, I was sitting here like, that was a little harsh. That was very personal. There's just some things that you never want to say in public. And, in behind the scenes, fine, all good and dandy. Because if y'all guys watched the Dallas Cowboys documentary when Jimmy Johnson and Jerry Jones had the whole fallout and stuff, Jerry Jones never publicly crapped on Jimmy Johnson. But we saw behind the scenes all that junk that he talked about Jimmy Johnson when the whole thing was going on about him, flirting with taking the Jaguars job. So Jerry Jones, by all means, if you feel a certain way about Micah Parsons, say it behind the scenes, say it to Steven and everybody else in the front office, fine. Just don't go out to the media and say this. It's not like you won the game. It ended in a tie for what it's worth. But this is just adding on to the Micah Parsons and Jerry Jones discourse that has been very just stressful for me and super draining to talk about. I'm tired of talking about it. I'm ready to move on. While I was consuming the Packers and Cowboys leading up to the game, it was just so frustrating. The morning of, everybody in the media was just talking about Micah Parsons is going to do this. What's going to happen with Jerry Jones and if Micah Parsons sacks Dak, blah, 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 blah. I'm just sitting here like, can we move on? As a fan of football, as media, can we just go ahead and live the fact that Micah Parsons is a member of the Green Bay Packers? He's not a member of the Dallas Cowboys anymore. Who cares who's going to win or lose? Because I can predict right now, I was very high on the Packers, but I don't think they're going to win a Super Bowl. If you're going to let the Dallas Cowboys do that to you, what makes you think a other contender is going to do that to you? Because, newsflash, they're not going to let Jordan Love drop 40 points. That's not going to happen. But I digress. But let's get back to the task at hand. Me personally, I thought Jerry Jones could have said this a little bit better. Because there's a whole couple of, and I might talk about it tomorrow night if I have another show tomorrow night. Micah Parsons, there was a whole lot of back and forth about the whole phone call thing when he got traded. There was a whole thing about that today. But I thought Jerry Jones was a little harsh with his comment. Now, was he 100% wrong? No, because I did some stats. I did some research. And I found something super duper interesting. And Colin Cowherd discussed it today on The Herd. The edge rusher is not the super important position right now in the NFL. It's really not. If you go down the list, outside of Nick Bosa, because they were able to develop talent around Nick Bosa, who are the highest paid edge rushers? Max Crosby, where's his team at? TJ Watt, where has his team historically been the last couple of years? Myles Garrett, where has his team been at? Brian Burns, where has his team been at? Josh Allen Hines, where has his team been at? So those are a couple names of the highest paid edge rushers right now. And you see relatively where all their teams have been when it comes to contending for a Super Bowl, because that is the ultimate goal for Jerry Jones and the Cowboys, right? It's always been about Super Bowl. Heck, for any team, it's always been about the Super Bowl. Now, I went and did some research, and I was pretty interested because I kind of knew my answer to my own, hypothesis. I was curious. I went back and looked and saw in the last 10 to 15 years, out of all the teams, for the winning team, who had a super dominant edge rusher on their roster? Out of the last 10 years, I found one team. That was the Denver Broncos in Super Bowl 50, when they had Von Miller. That was the last team to win a Super Bowl that had a super dominant edge rusher. The Eagles, when they won it, who did they have on the defensive line? They had Jalen Carter, interior. What about the Chiefs? Chris Jones, interior. What about the Patriots? They were well-versed on defense all around. Who else am I missing? The Rams, you had Aaron Donald in the middle. Hello? Those were the players that were playing for the Super Bowl winning teams. They didn't have prolific edge rushers. Only Von Miller. And another thing that we can say too as well is that team that had Von Miller, you had DeMarcus Ware. You had Cameron, I think his name was Cameron Wolfe in the middle at the defensive interior. You had Anthony Tredavis or something like that at the linebacker position. You had Aqib Talib. You had C.J. Harris at corner. You had an elite safety as well. I can't remember the guy's name on the top of my head, but they were elite. You know, the Broncos were really historically one of the best defenses to ever be assembled. They're not Legion of Boom type historic, but they were a darn good defense, and they put Cam Newton in an absolute blender in that Super Bowl. That is how elite that defensive tandem was. So if you can see, to put context into what Jerry Jones was trying to say and what the whole purpose of the Micah Parsons trade was for, is like, look, yes, we got the next, and he's been compared to this, we got the next Lawrence Taylor, Reggie White. I get it. But at the end of the day, we need players. One player is not going to get us to the promised land. And we could not afford to give this guy north of $45, $46, $47 million. In the case of the Packers, $47 million. You just can't do it. Not when you need every other position on the field at the moment. You need linebackers. You need safeties. You need defensive linemen. You need everything. So investing all that money into one person was not going to help that part of the defense. Because guess what? As we just previously stated, when Von Miller was on that team, they had a whole lot of other talent as well. It wasn't just Von Miller. They had DeMarcus Ware. Granted, he was on the latter part of his career, but darn it, he's about to be a future Hall of Fame. He is a Hall of Famer. I think he's a first ballot Hall of Famer. On the opposite side of him, rushing the quarterback, you had Cameron Wolfe, who was a darn good defensive tackle at the time. You had stud linebackers. You had two great corners in Aqib Talib and CJ Harris. Granted, Aqib Talib was on the latter part of his career as well, but CJ Harris was elite, considered elite at that time. I think they had AJ Boye as well. They were absolutely stacked at corner. And then at safety, they had a great safety. I think Jimmy Ward, that was his name. Jimmy Ward. Straight hit, sticking everybody. That defense they had that year was super elite. Name me anybody on the Dallas Cowboys right now, even remotely close to those guys, at any position. No one. Kenny Clark is better than Cameron Wolfe. But right now, even as old as DeMarcus Ware was, there's nobody as good as DeMarcus Ware on that defensive line. There's nobody at linebacker better than any of them fellas. Definitely nobody at corner. Maybe Deron Bland was better than Aqib Talib at the time. But nobody was better than CJ Harris. Or even anybody at Jimmy Ward at safety. So that was my cup of tea. And plus two, Jerry Jones has always believed that Dak Prescott could lead him to the Super Bowl. And this Dak Prescott that has been showing up so far this season is capable of winning the next Super Bowl. But granted, it's never been the problem of regular season with Dak Prescott. It's always been the problem of what can you do in the playoffs. And this year, we can go ahead and say that we're not going to be able to answer that question because the Dallas Cowboys is not even going to make the playoffs. They're not. I don't care what anybody says, they're not making the playoffs. So did Jerry Jones, was he right? Do I ultimately agree that he should have traded Micah Parsons? Yes, because I think in the long term, the Dallas Cowboys are going to be better. You get draft picks. There is specifically guys like Caleb Downs. You got some good offensive tackles. There's just a stud edge rusher right now in Miami. You got enough of picks to get some players. So I think it was the right move. Because you just cannot have an elite superstar like Micah Parsons and a bag of chips. You got to have complementary pieces around the whole defense. And another thing that we can say as well, which is 100% true, Jerry Jones and the Dallas Cowboys put themselves in this position. I've been over here playing the wrong daggone. I've been over here playing the wrong stuff and the wrong graphics the whole time. Excuse me for that. Jerry Jones and the Dallas Cowboys put themselves in this position because they could have signed Micah Parsons early and they could have done a better job drafting players, but they did not do that, and they put themselves in this situation to where they had no choice but to get rid of Micah Parsons. It could end up working out in their favor. And it could end up being what the franchise in the best interest in the future of the franchise. It's just we will never know until a couple years down the road. If they're able to, in the next 2 years, those 4 first-round picks, if two of them become fringe all-pro players, pro bowlers, and then the other 2 are just super key contributors, and if the Green Bay Packers aren't able to win the Super Bowl with Micah Parsons, that is going to be the only way we are going to be able to tell who won or lost this trade. But that's pretty much all I had to say about that, ladies and gentlemen. And we have reached the end of tonight's podcast. I wanted to learn how to keep it short. We've been going for roughly 50 minutes, and I think that's pretty appropriate for today's show. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you guys for joining and watching tonight. Forgive me for my, I didn't mean to have the wrong graphics going up there for some reason in that last segment of mine. Excuse me for that. I did not mean that whatsoever. But I hope you guys enjoyed. I will see you guys tomorrow, hopefully, if nothing changes. And we will have a good conversation in tomorrow's show. I might wait till Thursday. I don't know. Since I've done a show today, I might take a break tomorrow and catch up on some stuff. So if I don't see you guys tomorrow, I will see you guys roughly on Thursday. But if you enjoyed, hit the like button on the podcast. Subscribe to my YouTube channel. Check out my other videos when it pertains to sports. And follow the podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. I love you guys so much. And I will see you guys on the next podcast, most likely on Thursday. Peace, love, and positivity always, y'all. See ya.